Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are on the fourth instalment of our little journey through the Oracle of the Hekatean Path. So what are we doing today? Cards 13
to 18.
13 to 18. Now, I'm looking forward to this because there is at least one of my uber favourite cards in this slot. So, and there's a couple of other really interesting ones that I want to pick you. Well, there's a lot of other interesting things I want to pick your brains on. So starting off with card number 13. Right, I'm going to leave you to pronounce this.
So card number 13 is Apotropeos, the averter of evil.
Right, it's a good job I left that one to you because I would have been completely wrong.
But I will hold my hands up now and say if my pronunciation is bad, I do apologise to all native Greek speakers.
We were just laughing before, weren't we? Because, it's like we're talking about like sort of, I did New Testament Greek when I did my degree, but that was like back in the Jurassic era. It was a long time ago. And my pronunciation was awful then. But we were just saying, weren't we, this is like sort of English-speaking Greek pronunciation with a heavy Warrington accent and a bit of a Scouse accent thrown in. So,
yes,
not good, but we're doing our best. But I love this one, but actually for a very specific reason. This was like the third card we completed, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was one of the very few, the very first ones that you sort of did as an example to see if we were on the same wavelength.
And the funny thing is, this card stands more or less as it was created, wasn't it? For the, we didn't make any alterations to it. This fascinates me. The whole concept of it fascinates me because I remember you giving me the brief for this and basically saying female figure almost within force field aura getting bombarded with you name it. And the whole concept of this aspect of the goddess fascinated me. So run it from the top. Because
this notion of an averter of harm, an averter of evil, this apotropeos, it's not an aspect that's solely related to Hecate. Lots of different gods and goddesses across antiquity had this aspect. I mean, obviously, if you're going to worship a deity, you want to know that they're going to protect you and things that you hold, dear, like your home and your family, etc. And so, although it's quite a commonly shared role, again, because of Hecate's proximity and imminence to daily life for humans, the fact that her shrines were just inside the house and just on the borders, and in the city walls and stuff. So she was at all these different liminal places, watching over the comings and goings every day. And so this notion of her protecting, individuals and things, it has a very ancient origin. But the one thing I liked about the concept of this card was, whereas with a few of the other epithets we've kind of used statutory and stuff to sort of hint at the goddess, with this one I kind of wanted this notion of the silhouette not strictly to be referencing to the goddess, more to be referencing the person, the mortal that is asking for protection. Where I see the goddess in this card is this central heart fire, this emanation of soul that creates this cocoon of protection. And even when we look at things like Hecate's ritual observances, like the suppers and things like that, they all had an apotropaic effect. You basically made these offerings and hoped that they appeased the god, the gods and the restless dead and etc. without them, without any bad things befalling you and your family. And so this, even today, there's this huge viewpoint of Hecate as being, a protector and a guardian, as well as a warrior and a healing goddess. And I always see that this is, she had, that she more than capable of protecting you from, harm and negativity and stuff, but not like at the expense of experience and lessons that need to be learned. So, so it's just as easy as she can wrap you in this cocoon of protection. Sometimes you might actually need to let some things come through because it's part of the bigger life lesson.
I think what I loved about this, even when we were designing it, it was this. I love the sort of cocoon of energy that you'd envisaged, but also the fact that the figure that was protected inside. I mean, you've got all of these energy bolts hitting the cocoon, and just being bounced off and deflected. But this is no mere passive victim actually inside the cocoon being protected. It was that thing that you said about that fiery heart. Yeah. So I think this to me was just always a really positive card, because it kind of felt like she was giving you energy from within, but also protective energy from without as well. So there is this really, to me, there's always been this really triumphant feel about this. And the fact that it was one of the early images that we created, it kind of felt like a really auspicious start for the deck. So yeah. I do have quite an affection for this card,
Yeah, definitely. I think it in its simplicity, it kind of envisions that the goddess has got your back. If this comes up in a reading, you can see that if there are any negative influences, that they are going to be diverted and deflected in a way that will be beneficial.
It's lovely. And it was, I think when we did this one, it's funny as well, when you've done one card, you don't really have any sense of what the deck is going to look or feel like, because you've just got that one image. Then we'd done two, and I think the second one was the Brimo card, wasn't it? Which again changed very little. We did a little bit of color tweaking on it, but it's what you see in the deck is very much kind of what we originally created. But then once we'd done this one, I kind of thought, oh, I'm starting to get a feel for this now. And you start to, and I think particularly with it being this particularly, it kind of made me feel very positive about what we were doing. So, and moving on to the next one, it kind of goes from strength to strength, doesn't it? Because this is Liana.
This is actually, I mean, I think we both have an affection to this one because it's quite nice card, and yet it's one of those images that's not particularly necessarily going to be well known to people that may be new to the goddess. This idea of lions being associated with
so the full title on this is card 14, Liana, the lioness, and the subtitle is Strength, isn't it?
Yeah. So the notion behind this lion association, it basically comes from the Chaldean oracles, a system that's kind of hasn't survived antiquity, but has survived in basically other writings about them. So we have these fragments of these oracles in which Hecate is seen as one of the top principal deities in that particular system. And there are a few mentions of Hecate with lions, and so she's sometimes described within them as being lion possessing. And there is this wonderful line that says, "If you call upon me often, you will perceive everything in lion form."
Interesting.
And it's just this notion again that it's not giving anything away, and yet it's quite telling the more you sort of look into it and consider it. And when I sort of came up with the idea for this card, there's more than a subtle nod to the strength card in a standard tarot deck.
Yes.
But also this sense of obviously lions they're from Africa, this hot, sunny, fiery sort of land that they are associated with things like fire. I mean, Leo is a fire sign in the zodiac, and this notion of, again, this noble, strong fierceness, this strength, this, you know, inner resolve, that you can call on Hecate and be flanked by these protective, you know, rampant lions almost. And it was nice that I wanted to include the lioness rather than the lion, because, you know, it's easy to assume, you know, oh, it's a lion, so therefore it needs to have a mane and everything. And yet when we, you know, if you look at lions do, you know, the female lions tend to do most of the hard work in the pride and, you know, the hunting and things like that. So again, there is, I felt that the lionesses were more specific to this. You know, it's a goddess, so therefore she should be represented by female lions.
Yeah. And it's funny because this, I kind of really felt in my comfort zone when we were doing this card, because this was about as close as we got in to the tarot in my perceptions, because it really felt that like we were dealing with the same energy. I loved your concept for this, because I love the fact that we've got the sort of alchemical fire triangle almost as the throne through which her chariot is emanating, because there is this sense of, you know, of almost like a sort of chariot feel to this as well, isn't there? With the, flanked by a lioness on either side.
Yeah, you'd never actually thought about that until you just picked it out. But yeah, it does have that same energy between the Rider-Waite chariot.
It's kind of got the energy of both, which I loved, but also as well, it's so pleasing. You know, I remember we'd finished this image, and it was a relatively straightforward one for us to do, wasn't it? It came together fairly quickly. But I can remember just standing back from the computer screen and thinking, "Oh wow, you know, there's a real sense." I think we kind of did somehow capture a real sense of her power in this one, in a way
that kind of comes together with this notion that she's a guide and she's a protector and such, but she's not going to do everything for us.
No,
the strength is there for us to access, but she expects us to do the work.
Yeah,
I think that will come. That kind of motif is kind of throughout the whole deck. It's about saying that she does these things. She can help, but she's not going to do it all, because otherwise, there's no lesson to be learned if somebody's doing all of the hard work for you.
And I think it goes back to the previous card as well, in that, I mean, what struck me from the last card is the fact that she empowers externally and internally. Yeah. There is that, in the previous image, there's that incredible blazing heart that we used an image of a supernova, I think, didn't we? A Hubble Space Telescope image of a supernova to depict. But then you see that same energy sort of almost incarnate in this in card 14. And that's what I love. But also it feels like the next card is a similar progression. I mean, I kind of love 13, 14, and 15 because they kind of all deal with that fiery aspect and that almost that overwhelming power. So now this one is visually one of my two favorites from the deck. So when you outlined this to me, I kind of loved the concept, but then I just loved what we were able to do with it. So tell us a bit more about this one and what's going on. This is card 15, which is Hieros Peer, Sacred Fire, and the subtitle is Unity, isn't it?
Yeah. So obviously, fire is an associated element with Hecate in a lot of things. The torches and things like that. This notion of sacred fire, again, there's mentions within the Chaldean oracles of her being this flower of fire, and what I wanted to touch on with this card was that the more modern associations with the rite of her sacred fires, which is has now become an annual celebration of her mysteries every full moon in May. And people come to it for the first times. People do it every year. they do it on their own, they do it with groups, and it happens in, you know, across the world.
Yeah.
And I felt that the ongoing endurance of that particular ritual exemplified this notion of this sacred fire. We're all kindling these sacred fires, and even if we are, you know, 1,000 miles apart, there is this connection, this unity, by doing it at the same time, in the same way, you know, every year, kind of thing. And obviously, you know, kudos to Sarita Dieste for, you know, basically brainstorming part, you know, setting it all off, which was only meant to ever be a one-off, to celebrate it, basically to coincide with the publication of a book, an anthology that she wanted to do. But it was such a great success, that one that one ritual, that everybody said, oh, can we do it next year and next year and next year? And it's been going for over a decade now. It's just this great sort of community unification, which is partly how we see Hekatean, you know, this cosmic soul. You know, she embodies everybody.
This is one of the standout cards for me. I think maybe because it's one of the aspects that draws me to the goddess as a complete novice. But also, again, I mean, when you describe this to me, that concept of the flower of fire, that really drew me in. And I loved, because I wasn't really sure how we were going to express that. But you actually, you know, in the end, on your suggestion, we used the image of a dandelion, didn't we, at the center of what is in effect the sun on this card, and it just works. It works beautifully. But I love, again, the other thing that I love about this is the torches, because that's a motif that we see time and time and time again through this deck, isn't it? You know, either the goddess wielding a torch in each hand or standing between two torches. And, you know, there's just something so primal. You know, there is, I think it's funny, wielding a weapon is one thing, wielding a torch is something equally powerful to me. And again, it was just something that time and time again kept coming through. I also, for me, there is kind of elements of the Judgment card in a positive way, and also the Queen of Wands from the tarot in this card. You know, and it's made me realize that for me, Hecate sort of invokes so many of those archetypes and aspects as well. But then wrapped up here, I think for me, it was through this card that she kind of came through most powerfully. And again, this was kind of quite an early one, wasn't it? We did this sort of early in the sequence. I
think it was one of the first sort of waves of cards that we sort of pinned down. And again, I don't think anything other than the initial the flower was changed, obviously, to a dandelion.
No, it's just
we didn't really do anything else to it.
No, virtually there, but then it was within the sort of space of the sun. I remember you saying you wanted to kind of convey that flower of fire, and that was the only change we made for the better. You know, it really, it's a very powerful image, but then it would have to be because of what it's depicting, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, and
it's a joyful image as well.
Sorry.
It's a joyful image as well.
Oh yeah, and that's part of it. It's that sense of belonging, that sense of community. Like you mentioned, obviously, about it being quite a primal urge. You know, it touches back on that tribal instinct that you know, as much as we can be scattered across the globe and everything else, we can unify under Hecate with these sacred fires. You know, these torches are both lunar and solar. You know, Hecate is often, you know, associated with lunar aspects, but she does have this connection with solar aspects as well, especially the sun titan Helios. You know, she has some connections in the in sort of antiquity and things. She's and again, this fiery. There's a sort of parallel between fire and light in antiquity, and so you get this aspect and this sort of whirring, flaming, generative force that that emanates from Hecate, especially when viewed within the Chaldean oracles. And it's these sacred flames that she fans fans the flames of devotion in us. And I think when, especially when you are exploring Hecate, especially if you're new to her paths and stuff, there is this burning enthusiasm where you throw yourself into it. You want to know everything, and one of the best ways to do that is to get involved with the community, to ask from people that have walked these roads before. And it's even when we feel at our most isolated, there's this, we have, you can remember that we are all connected via these divine soul sparks that were, given to us at the moment of our incarnation, really.
And I think what really comes over in this card for me, more than anything else, is just the overwhelming power of spiritual fire. Physical fire is a metaphor for what we all experience internally. But when you actually step into that sense of communion, sense of connectedness, the kind of feeling of spiritual fire at that stage can be very overwhelming. And that's why I love this card. It's the community. Community is so much more than the sum of its parts. And I think everyone will bring their own little spark of fire into that collective, but then when they're combined, they become so much more, and it's sort of exponential. And that's why I love this card, because that's what I think all of us at some stage or another have really experienced that sensation of overwhelming spiritual fire, and it's almost like the sort of the shivers down the back, it's kind of beyond words, isn't it? But but I think, fingers crossed, I think we got it visually. I hope we did.
I think so.
Yeah. So number 16. This is, in a way, this is kind of the opposite. There's such a tranquility and a calmness about this card that I love, but at the same time, that it's the theme of the torch is still there, isn't it? So Dodophoros, the torchbearer, and the guidance card, isn't it?
Yeah, and obviously, a lot of us look towards Hecate for this sense of guidance, and we view the torches figuratively and literally, as these guiding lights, as this source of illumination, and it's easy to look at this light and look at the way it's leading, but sometimes we do find ourselves, there are times when we can't see the light, when we've lost direction, or we feel as though we've lost connection with the goddess and things like that. And the one thing I really liked about the way we executed this was this notion of like a tunnel, because sometimes you can just feel like you're trudging along in the dark and you don't know what where you are or what you're doing. And yet, if you actually can just stop a second and to take stock and actually look around and get your bearings, then you do tend to find that you are able to pick the light back up. And Hecate, with this notion, this light in the darkness, it's sometimes she is ahead of you, shining the light. Sometimes she's behind you, shining the light. But because you don't see her, you then fixate on not being able to see the light either. And it's not so much that she wants necessarily to lead you somewhere. Sometimes she's just showing you the options, and she needs you to make the choice. And so there is still this notion of this divine guidance. But the good thing about this card is, in its simplicity, is that it can be interpreted in many different ways. Is she leading you out of that tunnel? Is she leading you away from that light? Is she guarding the way before you move on to that next bit? You know, there are so many ways it can be interpreted. And obviously, you know, as you mentioned previously, Hecate's link with torches is just literally so iconic because it's one of the main notable symbols that is often associated with her. And again, you know, that has a long history, but, you know, in antiquity, you know, in the Homeric hymn to Demeter, you know, Hecate is said to come to Demeter on the 9th day holding torches, you know, to help look for Persephone. She's pictured on many, you know, pots and vases and stuff, usually in either the depictions of the myth of the abduction of Persephone, or perhaps sometimes in things related to the Eleusinian mysteries. You know, she's there with these torches. And, you know, you go back into the Titan War and she defeats Clytius with, you know, burning torches or fiery brands. So that, you know, it's one of those enduring symbols of the goddess that, and even to us, you know, it's quite a simple symbol, and yet it's just layered with so
much meaning.
Yeah.
One of the things I loved about your concept for this was, again, there's a kind of inner and an outer thing that we saw in the you know, the first card that we talked about. I mean, I love the fact that, you know, there is the light at the end of the tunnel in this image. But the other thing that I love is that without her standing there with the torch, okay, there would be the light at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnel itself would be hideously dark. So you feel as if there's light to guide you directionally, but also the light of her torch to guide you along the way. And the other thing that I liked here was the ambiguity of what we created. The fact that we've used a silhouette. It's very much in the perception of the reader, whether you are looking at Hecate's back or whether she's standing and facing you. And I think I've found that when I've been using these cards, that's changed from reading to reading, you know. And it's, you know, like you say, is she leading you into the tunnel and through it, or is she leading you out of it towards the light? Is, you know, if you turn round, would there be another light at the end of the tunnel? Or is it a case of you've got to journey quite a way yet before you get to that light and she's there to guide you? Again, there's just so much in a simple image that and I do find this card really reassuring. You know, it's very easy to relate to my own experience. And particularly, you know, my own experience last year, I mean, 2023 was a very dark year. This image, it gave me comfort and does give me comfort, you know, in that respect. And again, just as you said, the motive of the torch, so simple on one level, but on another, so profound and so multi-layered. Yeah. I think there's a lot more we could say about that. But
yeah, we could go down very many rabbit holes with that one.
Couldn't we just?
But I think the good thing with this card is it's probably one of those ones that will make more sense to the individual that's doing the reading you know, at the time, than rather than us waxing lyrical about the you know, the multiple meanings. I think when that card shows up in readings and spreads and things, that's probably going to be one of the deciding cards that will help you to interpret the direction of a reading, because obviously depending on where it is and what's around it, you will see you know, what the guidance is meant to be.
Yes. Yeah. How about number 17? Now this is something quite different, and yet again it's a motive.
This wasn't a card that I could see in this particular way initially.
Yeah.
I think what we definitely achieved with this was this notion that I often see Hecate in this key bearing aspect.
So this is, just to clarify, this is Clydukos, the key bearer, and the title on this is the unlocking, isn't it?
Yeah. And so obviously, again, keys are another symbol that's quite common to see associated with Hecate. You know, she sometimes is known as the cosmic key bearer. You know, she holds the keys to the underworld, things like that. And I've always seen that Hecate has these keys and that she can unlock things.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we're going to talk metaphor, you know, she can unlock locks and unlock doors, but she doesn't do it. And then it's one of those things that she can unlock it, but we're the one that has to cross the threshold. We have to, you know, we have to use it. Again, it comes down to that thing of she's not going to do everything for you. And in a similar way, she can quite easily lock things away. She can keep you from things if it's not, you know, if it's not of any use to you, or if you're not ready for it, you know. And I think when we looked at this and we kind of came up with this idea of this keyhole, and then seeing the goddess the other side through this keyhole, and then you kind of get again that ambiguity of, is she unlocking it from that side, or has she just locked it? Are we unlocking it? You know, there's this parallel between the two options. And I think it really, again, hits that sort of ambiguity that, again, depending on where it comes in a reading and what other cards are around it, will help to influence which way you see the energies of this card coming or going.
I loved the one thing about your concept that I loved. I mean, you're looking through the keyhole at the goddess, but she's actually standing, if you look closely, she's standing in the center of the spiral galaxy, isn't she?
Yes. So it's like, it's almost like looking from this very confined space through and out into this very vast cosmic expanse, which again, especially when we look at things like spiritual awakenings and stuff, that's what it feels like. You know, as soon as that key goes in that lock and turns, everything explodes and everything, you know, comes alive. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. So sometimes, you know, maybe we do need to peer through the keyhole before we, you know, throw the doors wide open.
Yeah, very much so. This was kind of one of the more enigmatic cards that we did, wasn't it? And I think I remember starting this one and you'd kind of outlined what you wanted. And it's kind of strange because I was looking at it thinking, how am I going to make that work? But it gradually did, didn't it? And
I think it wasn't, I think I was initially thinking too literally. I was just wanting to, you know, we just need to pick like the goddess with a bunch of keys or something. But again, I didn't want to just become it. I didn't want it to become completely fixated on the keys, because then it wouldn't have been an epithet so much as one of the symbol cards. And so we found this notion with this keyhole and these keys and then all of a sudden it kind of slotted.
It just kind of worked, didn't it? Because I mean, you had a really good outline of what you wanted, but I think both of us were kind of thinking, are we going to make that work? And then this is one instance where we started off with the outline that you'd given me, but we then improvised it a fair amount. So I think this is quite different from, you know, what would have been the original concept, but it just felt like a natural progression, didn't it? And I think because, you know, your original outline was so clear, you know, I could then weigh that up and say, this is going to work, this isn't. And it was, I don't remember spending huge amounts of time on this card. It was kind of one of the more challenging ones, but then luckily, I think we kind of just slotted into the groove that it needed. And it's certainly one of the most enigmatic cards. And I do love that, as you say, looking from that very confined space of the keyhole out onto this huge cosmic panorama. And it does give you a sense of her power. So, and again, there's something quite reassuring if this pops up in a reading. There is a sense that even if you can't see the solution straight away, it's there. It's kind of just hovering, and you know she's got the key and she's ready to put it in the door and unlock it for you. And then, as you say, it's you know, are you brave enough to step over that threshold? You know, and that's the question of the reading, isn't it? Oh. Number 18.
Yeah. Now I think this was a later addition to my original ideas.
I think, if I remember rightly, you took a card out and then replaced it with this. So this is card 18, Cloth Eye, the Spinner of Fate, and this is the subtitle for this is the Destiny card. Now, you tell everyone the serious bits and the spiritual bits behind this, and then I'll kind of share something really rather silly of how I solved making this image.
Okay, so obviously when people think about fate and spinning of threads and things like that, obviously people think of the actual fates from Greek mythology, or possibly things like the Norns from Norse mythology. But this notion of the fates and Hecate, they quite closely link this triplicity of form, or figures. So obviously, the fates were three goddesses that sort of meted out threads of life and wound them, and then when the time came, cut them. And similarly, you have close links to other triplicities, things like the Furies and things like that, where there are all these different aspects that can have these quite close associations with Hecate. And again, you've got even when you go to like Macbeth, you've got the three witches, and they do petition Hecate, but there's this weird fate sort of almost like weaved into it as well, because obviously they're metering out the fate for Macbeth and all of the other characters that are involved in that. And in antiquity, the will of the fates was seen to be unchangeable, and you couldn't move it or do anything about it. Even Zeus, he had to abide by this particular metering out of fate. And I think in a similar way, he didn't take away anything from Hecate when the Olympians came to power. And I think it's one of those things that has a kind of similarity, that he didn't take anything from Hecate, and he has to abide by the fates. There's this sort of almost unspoken rule of, actually, I know where not to overstep my bounds, kind of thing. And it's we see images of Hecate in triplicity. Obviously this epithet does occur in some antiquity sources, but it's not one that's necessarily very often, I don't know, like thought about. The notion of destiny is quite a big thing.
Broad, isn't it?
Yeah, and some people think that it exists, and some people think that it doesn't exist, and then there are other people that think, yeah, it might do, but we can influence change on it and such like that. And I think this notion, especially when we look at the previous cards, like the guidance card in Dodaphoros and the averting card in Apotropaios and things like that, that we do have a rough planned route, whether we're aware of it or not. And it kind of makes me think a little bit back to the old like Jason and the Argonauts, the gods playing chess with people, kind of thing. And I'm not for an instant saying that that's exactly what's happening and we have no say in it. But there's this notion that there are certain things we will have to go through. There will be certain things that will go wrong, and there will be certain things that are unavoidable.
Yeah, there's a notion that even though the gods might be moving the chess pieces, that doesn't mean to say that we're completely controlled, but it does mean to say that there are bigger unseen influences in our lives. So it's like we have a certain amount of strength and influence and determination, but then this is the whole idea behind the tarot. If you look at the court cards, represent us as people. The minor arcana, numbered cards represent the scenes and circumstances that we move through. But then the major arcana are those big unseen forces that are bigger than us and that actually wield influence over us that is beyond our control, beyond our power. And I think that's what I love about this card. And also, I very much saw that sort of tarot parallel in this, because I relate this to the sort of the Wheel of Fortune card from the Juliet Sharman-Burt Mythic Tarot, which I think was your first tarot deck, wasn't it? It was certainly one of the early ones that I that earlier ones in my collection. But yeah, it is that sense of fate is not completely in our control. We might have some influence, but we've not got all the influence.
No. And that I think that's where Hecate comes in, is that we can affect change, and we can make decisions, and we can and we can hope for the better outcomes. But there is also this thing that we waste so much time and energy resisting the things that we can't change or can't stop. And if we actually stop fearing and reacting negatively when these changes happen, then it becomes that we actually put the power of our destiny back in our court, because we can actually invest energy in better, avenues.
That's right.
And again, the path is laid out, but the gods sometimes throw things in the way of us, obstacles and stuff. Not out of spite, but this is what then triggers lessons and life experience. And again, we can petition, though, especially those of us that associate, Hecate with magic and witchcraft, and that those of us that practice, we can petition Hecate and the fates to sort of look kindly on, what we're trying to achieve, so that we can sort of almost. I can't remember if it is Jason Miller or Jack Grail, but one of them uses the phrase of "grease the wheels of fate," and it's almost like you can't completely, divert what's going to happen, but if you do the right things and you petition the right gods or spirits, you can kind of almost just squeeze it slightly, in your favor. And I think that is where I think that's what Hecate encapsulates in this, and I think when we think of spinning and I think we've used the motif as well, this spider web and this threads of fate kind of thing,
and the intricacy of the web as well. That's what I love. When you said about you wanted a spider's web in there, I thought, it's perfect. It kind of has this feel of a wheel, but at the same time there is the intricacy of it and the interconnectedness of it all that comes over. We end on something a bit lighter, in that this was, I'll kind of make a confession, I really had to improvise this one, didn't I? Because the three figures on here, the initial idea was obviously, we kind of looked at reference, we were looking at reference images of statues of the fates, weren't we? And we knew we wanted this to be a silhouette card, but I could not get a single image where I could get a convincing silhouette of these three. So we did improvise it in the end, because I think Fate on the left and Fate on the right were based on statues, weren't they? And
I think they were illustrations.
Were they illustrations?
Of Greco-Roman sort of women. And
that's right. Yeah. So that was fine, but then the middle one, I've got to make a confession, because that's actually not a statue or a authentic Greco-Roman illustration. That is actually the film star Jane Mansfield. And I was randomly going through my reference material, and I found this fabulous image of Jane Mansfield, I think at the Oscars, and she's got like a gold scarf. And when you look at something, you think, I can't do that, but it's going to work. So she is a goddess, but not quite the one that you think. But actually, again, when you reduce things into silhouette, and then we dropped her in there, and actually, all of a sudden, the thread was there, wasn't it? And so you've got two ancient goddesses and a Hollywood goddess in there. But then again, I'm sure Hecate will forgive us, because it worked in the end.
And I think it worked well that we don't have like what we see in the actual fates of there being one that's going to cut the thread. We've just got this notion of the thread is passing through all of the hands of
I love that
goddess. And
when you said that you just wanted them holding the thread up, and it's kind of almost again with this, what I love is there is almost like a similar feel to when you see the sort of early traditional Wheel of Fortune cards with the goddess Fortune spinning the wheel blindfold. But when we created this image, I really thought they're playing with the thread, you know, and you think, are they going to cut it? Are they going to snap it? Are they going to drop it? They're playing with it. And there is a sort of precariousness. I also love the fact that you wanted the infinity symbol in there, you know, which kind of gives it that completely timeless feel. And this is, you know, this is an ageless principle. You know, the act of the fates is an ageless and timeless thing.
Yeah.
So that's our 6 cards.
Yeah.
So that kind of went quick. But for everyone who's watched, thanks for joining us, and do join us next time because we will be covering cards 19 to 24.
Yes.
So thanks again, and we'll see you soon.